It's time for part 2 of my Halo Wars Complete campaign commentary, in which we'll get right back into the swing of things with the plot. A cutscene shows up, which tells us the Covenant are up to something, somewhere. They're looking for something that will unlock the secrets of an ancient something, because they believe this something is the key to reversing their fortunes in their war against those pesky humans with their pesky tendency to bring a shotgun to a sword fight. So that's why they've been snooping around ancient ruins, but they also realise that maybe they can kidnap the human scientist tailing them, Anders. Anders showed she could use the Forerunner devices back in Mission 3, and it's such a device preventing the Covenant activating a Forerunner shipyard or something of some kind. Therefore, Anders must be captured alive. Meanwhile, the humans were investigating the Covenant investigating some other ancient ruin. And after much drama with me struggling to get the golds I needed to get this far in this all golds campaign, we'll now face the next challenge. There is a giant laser attached to the door of the ruin we want to check out. It's described as a partially built scarab, which is the Covenant super tank unit of sorts, although later you see and fight fully built scarabs that are much less powerful than this. So I don't know what this is supposed to be really. The point is, you have to kill it. But there is a gimmick in that its laser beam sweeps across the map back and forth. You have to use cover to avoid damage and take out power nodes to slow its traversal rate to a manageable level. And I quickly found that moving tanks out is difficult here, as the speed of the laser doesn't gel well with the lack of speed of the tanks. But if speed is what we need, then, well, we've got a unit that does that you've seen me using here and there throughout the campaign, but not very much because I just didn't really think it was going to be that good. But now it's time for the Warthog to shine as I spam them out. Warthogs are our scout unit, but they can be upgraded to have a railgun and a grenade launcher, making them an okay combat unit. They have the advantage of being very cheap and being built from the base's central building. That means you don't have to dedicate a building slot to making them, so you can have a better economy or a more versatile setup instead, and well, it makes me think that rushing Warthogs might be a pretty good plan on loads of other stages. It's just that this is the one where their utility is most obvious because you need to dart around quickly. I did at first have a couple of other units in the blob, like I had some Scorpions and Cobras around the place, but they got taken out soon enough, and after seeing how powerful the fully upgraded Warthogs actually were, I realized we don't need to have any like DPS units in the clump. Like, this clump is DPS, we can just spam Warthogs all over the place, so that's going to be the plan. There is one other thing that's specific to Warthogs, I guess, anyway, which you can do in this particular stage, making this the ideal time to be spamming them, and it's this thing here. Once you get close to the Scarab, you can't really stay out of the laser's line of sight while attacking it, which makes things difficult. However, after losing a few units to this, I was like, well, can I just move out of the way? And the answer is yes, and this is more effective than I thought. The laser will track the last target it tried to fire at, and it takes a second or two to fire, which is more than enough time for a Warthog to get back out of its line of sight. All that means is, well, you saw it happening here. The laser will track towards the Warthogs moving right, thus not going on its natural cycle of moving left to destroy my whole army. It then goes back to that cycle after a couple of seconds, so I just have to move another one. You could probably, though, just have the same one moving left to right like over and over again to stop the laser from ever firing, which invites the idea that Warthog rushing might not be the best plan, because this strategy can be done with just one Warthog in principle, and you start the stage with one Warthog, so if you're really good, you can just get the laser disabled from the beginning for all intents and purposes. And you can see here, like, we've spent a while just absolutely pounding this Scarab with millions of Warthogs, and it's not doing very much damage. So bringing something with better DPS or Cobras, the anti-building unit, might be more effective here. I don't know, there's probably a better way of doing this that doesn't involve only making one kind of unit. Well, ultimately, this plan does work. We win the mission with a silver, not really the best time and not really the best combat rating either, because I lost loads of non-Warthog vehicles and a whole bunch of the Warthogs along the way. Not the best performance, however, the solution here was obvious. Spam the Warthogs even harder. Yes, I was just discussing other solutions that might involve doing something actually good or even clever, but no, I can just do this less clever plan better. That's all I need, because last time I didn't actually start spamming the warthogs from the very start because I was going to spam something else. Meaning, if I just don't make the vehicle factory and start building warthogs from the very beginning, we'll have more supply pads to tech up faster and we'll get our build-up going earlier, so we'll have our pop cap earlier, we can move out earlier and do things better. Therefore, here we are with another attempt. Once ready, I went out with the warthogs all over the place and, well, I did have a plan actually to use 2 warthogs as a distraction to try and get the laser out of its cycle early on, that thing I was mentioning before. However, it failed miserably, and I probably wouldn't have had the micro to pull it off anyway, so probably for the best. We finished things up with the same juking around the laser plan as before, and we get the finish with almost double the combat bonus compared to last time. It was barely any faster than last time. I did expect it to be faster, and well, it just wasn't as usual, but still, the combat bonus is enough to get a nice solid gold and we can move on. A nice, simple, short mission. A pattern that will surprisingly be repeating itself a lot in the second half of the game. A refreshing change of pace from the very heavily scripted and cheap-feeling slogs we've seen before. Speaking of cheap-feeling slogs, you're watching OffiD's Game Grounds, where we're now going to watch Forge flirting with Anders in the ruins of the Scarab, and Anders is being Sundara, exactly the sort of thing we like to see. However, we encounter an advantage the Covenant have that they don't really use that much. They can turn invisible. Yes, they have stealth field technology that's basically perfect, but they forgot to use it for military purposes in most circumstances. So that's a shame for them. This one guy though is able to take down Forge, although he's spared because Anders agrees to surrender. And the Covenant guy takes the deal very reasonable, and with that, they now have their human interpreter to handle the Forerunner tech. It does take some convincing to get our captain to chase after them, probably because we didn't really save the current planet that's under attack very much, but as Spartan mentions, it is a security risk to let them capture Anders, so we'll go and get her back for a bit. We track the enemy ship to Unknown Planet, which shows we've got some work to do in the astronomy realm if we're still encountering big habitable worlds with human breathable air, as it turns out, just like we've never noticed them before around here, even though we've colonized this area. Maybe the warp drive tech, or whatever we're using, is allowing us to jump really far away. Maybe this is the other side of the universe or something, in which case I'll give them a pass for not knowing about this place before. We now have another small-scale mission where, instead of a base, we're given an elephant. Unfortunately, not literally. It's a vehicle that has this clown car-like capability where it spits out infantry units on its own, and also you get this background income. So you can sit in the corner just making an army out of nothing. That's handy. You're trapped in this corner with a load of Covenant blocking your escape. However, if you don't defeat them for a while, a load of AI-controlled Spartans just appear behind them and will get the job done on their own pretty much. So that's also very handy. We're going to be wandering around here looking for signs of where the Covenant might have taken Anders. And with only a whole planet to search, I'm sure sending 20 guys to go out on foot to just look around with their eyes is the way to do that. We'll find her soon enough. However, a couple of the other parties doing this are being mysteriously killed off by the local fauna, and if you've played the classic game Halo, you might notice what's going on here. They're getting attacked by the Flood. In my first part, I was like, ugh, this game can't be canon, and this is probably why I think that. In my recollection, the Flood are a biomass-consuming species that destroys all life if given half a chance, and were defeated and sealed away by the Forerunners until you accidentally unseal them in Halo while you're poking around, or maybe the Covenant unsealed them, I can't remember. Why the Forerunners didn't kill the Flood, if there's such a problem, I'm not quite sure either. But it might be one of these things where, if you looked around human labs, you'd probably find some Black Death bacteria around the place and stuff like that. So they were keeping them alive for whatever reason, and it was supposed to be a big deal in Halo that you accidentally unleashed them upon the galaxy. But maybe they were already unleashed upon the galaxy. They're doing pretty well on this planet just on their own. I don't know. Somebody in the comments tell me, is this game canon, or is it retconning things, or what is the deal with the Flood anyway? Are they a problem? And what's a Forerunner while we're at it? I think, in my extremely vague recollection, what the Forerunners were was also retconned at some point during the Halo timeline, the Forerunners were retconned into being humans or something like that, which would explain why they kind of speak human languages and why Anders can use their keyboard so easily. I don't know. I don't know if this all actually makes sense in retrospect, or whether it's all just contrivances because it doesn't matter whatsoever. And well, it could be both. I wasted a bunch of time in this mission just poking around in the corners, as we can see, because there are various flood buildings here and there which you can attack. If you kill them, they just come back. So this is just wasting time completely, and nothing was achieved. We're facing the real objective of the stage now, which is to collect the 2 elephants that were lost to the flood. They are defended by a variety of blobs, big and small. The small ones have the unique ability that when they kill your infantry, the infantry will then come back as zombie-like enemies. So you can see why the game has conveniently made it so that infantry is all we're allowed to build out of these elephants. I didn't really do anything about this zombification mechanic. I barely even noticed it, I think. I just happily ploughed my men into the infection zone, promptly lost them all, then had to re-kill them. And, well, the answer here would be use things that don't turn into zombies, that being Forge, the Spartans, and your elephant, which has a bunch of machine guns on it. And broadly speaking, using Spartans as tanks, as things to absorb damage, is already a good idea, as we learned the hard way in part 1. So I should have known, but I didn't. I probably was just playing carelessly as usual. Once you clear the first elephant, you get to keep it, which will make doing the second one easier, but it also then lets you make a base, and this is something of a red herring. I sat back and started executing the Hornet Rush strategy you saw me practicing in part 1, wanting to be ready for anything. I now know that the force I had here is more than enough to finish the stage, because of the anticlimactic nature of the ending here. Luckily, because I was in the rush mindset, I did discover this the first time through. I went to free the other elephant before making a huge army of hornets, which would have been the temptation here. And, well, the base turns out to only really act as a place to make turrets, so you can kill flood units walking around in that area, because the side objective is kill 750 infections, as it says, which I think it just means flood units. And that's quite a lot. That could take a while if you're not killing stuff constantly all over the place, so the base is good for that. But I found that after you free the second elephant, it tells you to go back to the base with it. I just did that straight away, and as I was doing this Hornet Rush strategy and getting to the good part, the part where you actually make the Hornets, the mission just comes to an end because all you had to do was get the elephants back to this general area. Obviously I was expecting some kind of and now we have to hold this area for 10 minutes against a flood of flood, and that would also justify more having those other parts of the map you could go into, because stuff would spawn there and come at you from all directions, that sort of thing. It kind of felt like they were going that way. So we completed the mission relatively quickly, but I didn't do 2 of the side goals. You have to find some hidden infantry somewhere and kill enough of the enemies. I did know about those goals and I was planning to do them, but I just didn't expect the mission to end so quickly. It felt like I would make my big ball of hornets, and then I'd be able to go out and do the Find the Lost ODST Squad mission with the ball of hornets. I was ready for this, but no, it seems I was over-prepared and just didn't really do the mission quite as they intended, and once again, I'm blaming the game. It really felt like it was pushing me towards getting ready for something more exciting than what really happened here. I'm just coping. They should have let me get the gold the first time by having the stage be designed better. I was ready to do better than I did. Despite the obvious improvements there, I didn't immediately do it again this time. Perhaps mercy, or perhaps I didn't really like that stage and was mad at the anticlimax. So we move on to Mission 9, which begins with a cutscene of a Spartan absolutely totaling a warthog thanks to its abysmal handling. And if you've played Halo, yes, this is very much canon. Old video game driving physics were a trip. Our mission now is to go find those stranded Spartans, while also, I suppose, finding Anders. We're literally looking for her by just wandering around the desert and seeing if she's behind a rock or something. We seem to have forgotten that the Covenant were the ones who took her. There are no Covenant here, but let's look anyway. They almost certainly needed to have there be an actual in-game reason for us to fight the Flood if they wanted to have these missions. How about the Covenant accidentally release them on this planet while messing with those controls on the Forerunner devices? That would make sense. And you have to save Anders and the Covenant from the Flood. There you have it, that would be fun. I mentioned in part 1 the game doesn't do the best job with its plot, and I think it's following on from something I touched on in that part, that the characters don't really react to the plot occurring. Even the plot doesn't react to the plot occurring. They don't have interest in any Forerunner tech they come across. And now we've found this undiscovered habitable planet filled with body-infesting zombie creatures, and it's just another day at the office, I suppose. I hope Anders turns out to be in some random dell in the middle of nowhere. It feels like encountering the Flood should be a bigger deal, and it should be plot-altering if you're going to put it in the plot at all. And I don't know, it should be tied into the main plot, the other plot as well in some way. But really it's just like a gameplay interlude. They wanted something different, but they didn't really have an excuse for something different to happen. So it just happens without the excuse. There you go, now we're fighting the Flood, the characters have forgotten what they're supposed to be doing. They don't recognize that this isn't helping. Well, they actually are going to slightly tie it in, as we'll see, in an extremely tangential way. Does any of this really matter? No, I only care because I've become invested in the plot, because A, Anders is Sundara, and B, because they put so much money and effort into all these beautiful cutscenes, the plot, being a forgotten element of the overall experience, seems like a waste. Now, while I was ranting there, something actually happened. In the beginning of this stage, you can see there's another base on your minimap, and what I wanted to find out was whether you could just go there straight away and start using it. And it turns out sending an elephant is enough to get there without being killed. There are all sorts of things in your way, but they don't really chase you / can't kill an elephant. So you can start your second base right away if you just go there immediately. With that knowledge, I restarted the stage and went there immediately with 2 elephants. Those elephants can then guard the base site while we get the resources to build it up and put turrets down, and it's all good. So what are we going to do with 2 bases and a really strong economy early on? Of course, we're just going to do the world's fastest Hornet Rush, with spare resources flowing directly out of the wazoo. We really are in a great position here to do this strategy. The question is it a good strategy? The answer, well, not really. The Flood have these large-scale defense tower-like units called Storks, I think, or something like that. And they can shoot from beyond a Hornet's range and kill a Hornet very quickly. Really, the Hornets aren't that good, their stats aren't very good. They just rely on the fact that most units in the game can't shoot at airborne targets, which makes them invincible against like most stuff the Flood have, for example. However, they're very weak against what can fight back, so I was losing these things all the time. We have so many resources we can just replace them, but of course it's not good for the combat bonus. The menace of the combat bonus lurks in the background. By the time I had saved the Spartans, the real goal of the mission had become apparent. You have to defeat a large Flood hive at the top of the map. This hive gets weaker if you kill the 5 smaller hives around the map, with the twist that these hives rebuild themselves. So it turns into this whack-a-mole situation where you need to have them all dead at the same time, ideally, then push on the final base. If you're wondering how defeating the hive is important in our quest to find Anders, they are going to tie it in, as I said, so just wait 1 second. It turns out that for this secondary objective I was talking about, you only have to kill the small hives once. I thought you had to have them all dead as you completed the mission to complete the secondary objective. You get an achievement, I think, if you do that, but you don't actually get the extra points. You just have to have killed them at some point. So while I was whack-a-moling them with 2 groups of units and trying to keep them all dead, you don't have to do this. As long as they've all been dead at some point, you'll get all of the points for the optional objective. I'm also going around with 2 groups. We've got the Hornets doing most of the stuff, but also the 3 Spartans just on their own control group, I expect. And it'll be 3 Spartans going in that actually kills the big hive in the end as well. 3 Spartans is enough to do most jobs in the game. This is the thing that I keep learning and forgetting. It's hard to say because I'm sort of remembering myself, remembering it now and not knowing how little I knew at the time. But this mission was a good example of what 3 Spartans can do, because I needed to have 2 groups. Having those 3 Spartans go into an enemy base and just take it out on their own proves that they can do basically anything, and that's going to be a lesson we'll need to use to get better scores, I assure you, on other missions. I just keep forgetting it because of my obsession with Hornets, apparently, and we'll see that obsession come to bite me again in a second. In this mission, it wasn't too bad because while you do lose Hornets all the time, you're killing so much stuff at the same time that the combat bonus, the ratio, is still going to be pretty good. But the Spartans are the ones who really give you the ratio because they just kill tons of stuff without taking any losses whatsoever, and you could just do that, were you so inclined. I was trying to remember, the Spartans have names, the 3 Spartans you're usually given, that is. I think it's Alice, Jerome, and Douglas. You might say those aren't the names of badass space marines from the year 2500, right? Well, they are, and I think the main Spartan, like the Halo guy, is literally called John. John Halo, I presume. Well, I'm glad that in the far future, culture hasn't changed at all. In fact, it's changed even less than real-life culture has changed from the time when people named Douglas could be found in the wild. Well, anyway, did anyone see the plot link shoot by while I was casting shade on Douglas there? It was mentioned extremely briefly that killing the Flood hive allowed us to receive a signal from somewhere. Why? It was the will of the Force. So that signal turned out to be from the kidnappers' ship, so now we know where they actually went and can get back to business to some extent. They've taken Anders to the place we saw earlier in an earlier cutscene where they've got some war-winning machine that they don't know the password to or something, and they think Anders might, and maybe she'll just turn it on for them if they ask her very nicely. They are quite polite for a kind of brutish alien species. They're not going to torture her or even really ask her to do anything. They just kind of hope that she might, and we saw earlier they were very reasonable in taking her alive and leaving Forge alive in exchange for that. All very nice of them. Well, they're distracted by the fact the humans have now showed up. So we showed up basically right after they did, despite our massive, sideshow there. You could say this plot was written without that sideshow being in mind. Oh well. It turns out to get to this Covenant place, it's underground somewhere. We'll have to go through some sort of gigantic chasm. This chasm is a Forerunner device itself, and it's going to suck us in through the ground. Now, this might sound like a good thing because we're trying to get in there. However, we accidentally deployed most of our army all over the planet to fight the Flood for some reason. So the problem here is just that while we do need to go down here, we need to go down slower so everyone can get back to the ship first. And this automatic docking sequence we've sort of accidentally stumbled into is only going to give us a few minutes to actually do that. Therefore, we head out to the next mission where we have to rescue a bunch of, human troops that are under pressure from the Flood before a time limit runs out. This proves to be a somewhat difficult mission, and in my memory of the game, this is the hard part of the second half of the game, although I also remember the reason it's hard is quite specific to me, a reason called Hornet Rushing, so let's see how it goes this time. At first, Hornet Rushing seems like a natural solution for this stage, because you have to defend 3 locations to save squads there, before later cutting a path to them, and sending Hornets is a way to do this. However, the fact that Hornets aren't very good rears their ugly head again. A few early Hornets isn't enough to hold that first point that's under attack, and most stuff, including my Hornets, dies over there pretty quickly. Here's something I didn't notice while playing. The game asks you to extend the time limit by moving units to sit by these Forerunner pylons. I was building units to do this, rather than using the ones it gives you for free. You use these gremlins, a very rare kind of unit, and it gives you a gremlin every time it asks you to move a gremlin to a pylon in this mission. I didn't notice, and I was building them myself, thus wasting resources and such. As for what a gremlin is, by the way, I don't know. They have some sort of combat function, I guess, but you rarely get to use them, and I didn't try them out. So there you go, I'm Offie D, the man who knows a few things about Halo Wars, as I said, back at it again with this slightly incisive commentary. I can say a few things about this game, I guess. Well, we've encountered the real problem, as you might have seen. Once I had a bunch of Hornets, I was able to save the first squad, but I wasn't able to fully save them by taking out the Flood base nearby. It proves to be defended by a large number of the long-range towers, the same ones I was having trouble with before, and their concentration proves to be too much to just brute force my way through it, especially when combined with the Swarm. These are the bird-like Flood units that spawn infinitely from these bases, providing air combat options that remove the nothing can attack them advantage the Hornets tend to rely on. Seeing how badly things were going, I ran away. And I thought, well, I just need to get the Wingman upgrade to make the Hornets better. It gives them marginally higher attack, probably. But I also did something seemingly unthinkable. I mixed in a second type of unit. This leads to an attack where I have 2 tanks amongst the Hornet ball. I've stooped very low to such dishonourable tactics as unit mixing here, like a peasant, and my Hornet Rush purity is sullied, my family name is cast into the mud, but we can't see the results. The Hornets got owned and a few survivors limped away, but the tanks just sit there killing everything and barely taking any damage. This is because while the game doesn't bother to mention this, there is this armor system in the game. Well, I say it doesn't mention it. It's actually one of the few things it does mention, you could say, because when a unit is selected, it tells you its armor rating at the bottom. What it does, who knows? What the range and attack values on units are, well, that would be nice to know, please, as well. I am very number-starved in this game, and I am a little bit mad about it. But anyway, thanks to some unknown damage reduction, and having an unknown but surely high HP level, the Swarm can't really do anything against the tanks, so we just cut our way through them. Now, seeing this, I threw my principles away, and I turned to a new heresy. I restarted the mission, to execute a scorpion rush instead. I could also capture the circular thing off to the side of the base right away, which turned out to be a power plant. That's handy. And once I had a bunch of scorpions, I ploughed forward and just started getting the job done. They're still vulnerable to those long-range attacks. However, they're more suited to staying still while fighting, so the static healing AoE you can place down is more useful with scorpions. And we also have to speculate on what losing a tank does to your combat bonus. Does it count as losing one thing, and hence it's equal to a Hornet loss? Or does it count as losing 5 PopCap or 500 resources, in which case it's more similar to 2 Hornets lost? Well, either way, it's better, because while one Scorpion might die killing an enemy base somewhere in the mess of pathfinding and enemies attacking from outside of your line of sight, I was losing 5 Hornets minimum to do it the air way. So we're slowly being forced to admit that Hornets aren't always the best thing ever. But yes, we do save the first squad, and by save I mean sort of. Everything except one unit was dead, but that still counts. And then we simply have to do the same thing to the other flood bases, and we can just drive in and do that right away. The main challenge will be the pathfinding, as mentioned, because getting all the tanks into combat is quite difficult. And then withdrawing damaged tanks like the leading tanks is going to be basically impossible. So things are messy and stressful, but at the metaphorical end of the day, we're killing way more value than we're losing, imperfections or not. So this, unfortunately, is the way to play, and you could probably do this on all of the flood missions. I have to admit it, but the pathfinding's so annoying that we have to cling to faith that this madness can be overcome somehow. I am the chosen one who will bring balance to the optimal Halo Wars unit composition meta. If only I was playing impossible creatures, I could combine a Hornet and a Scorpion to get the best of both. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, watch my video on impossible creatures. Also, if people writing sci-fi lore for franchises could stop naming everything after A, animals, and B, Greek gods, that would be grand. Little side point there, let's just move on. My ball of tanks now spends the next 5 minutes killing its way across the map, although not entirely, because I foolishly prioritised taking out the main enemy bases that were threatening the squads. But once again we fall into the trap of accidentally doing an objective that messes something up. This time, when you save the third squad, you have to then run it back to base, while billions more enemies spawn in to stop them. So while I can form enormous walls of tanks to make sure they all get back safe, this stops me from exploring the parts of the map I didn't go to yet, and that's where the remaining optional objectives lie. We need to find all of the pillars for extending the time limit, and I haven't killed enough swarm enemies to get the killing objective. Essentially, we took out the bases too quickly, it seems. Suffering from success continues. It's another example of the thing I don't really like about some of these goals, where playing too well makes them harder. I don't need to kill 350 swarm, and I don't need the extra time limit, and I'm being punished for not needing them. I'm playing too quickly, I should have done it slower. Along those lines, it's time to cash in on some of the ideas we've been banking. First, we go back to that mission where you save the elephants from the flood. If only one of the Spartans was called Noah, we could do something with this right here. Well, all I have to do is play this stage more carefully and ignore the fact that certain places you can go are red herrings where nothing happens. So even though I'm exploring more methodically, we're still going to do things faster than last time, probably because I wasn't wasting so much time. I advance with only the Spartans as well, because they can't be turned into zombies by the flood, which keeps the enemy count down. And as mentioned a load of times, 3 Spartans will kill anything pretty much, and if they don't kill them, they'll revive and try again, so this is a pretty safe plan of attack. The other difference this time is that I took out all of the flood pods, the little buildings all over the map, because killing them adds to the infections removed counter. But it's quite boring, as they don't draw aggro on their own. You have to manually order things to shoot at these. They're not quite like enemy buildings, and there are 200 of them, so that's what the non-Spartan troops mainly got up to. Meanwhile, the base can be used to grind kills also, by prioritizing building and upgrading turrets first and foremost. We don't really need to focus on getting units out quickly, of course, and we've got plenty of resources to spare. Eventually I brought out some scorpions to help the Spartans with the final push, since they also can't be turned into zombies. The problem was, while I was completing the mission there, I still need more kills, so we still need to slow things down towards the end. The answer is just don't send the elephants to your base when it tells you to, because I now know that completes the mission unexpectedly. So we just delay that, and more stuff spawns around the edges of the map, giving us a gradual trickle of kills over time, and then once the numbers are right, we go back and complete the mission. All the optionals are done, minimal losses, maximum combat bonus, and it wasn't too bad for time in the end as well, despite a bunch of waiting around and just playing things slowly. We smashed that gold and moved right on to mission 10, once again the pylon thing. I did this mission exactly the same as before, with the Scorpion Rush, although I mixed in a few Wolverines here and there to grind out faster swarm kills. The most important difference actually is just driving to all the corners to uncover all the pylons. Then I take the free gremlins that spawn in your base and get those goals done, easy peasy. I did mess up towards the end though, because I made the classic mistake of doing the main objective. I cleared out the final squad's area before doing the last pillar, which is just next to them. That means my main force will be distracted doing this side objective, while the map begins to be covered with these strange troll-like things that spawn for the final run back to the base. Furthermore, if you were looking with eagle-eyed precision there, you might have seen that when I bandbox selected Charlie Squad to move them out, I missed one of the units. And the end result is that I roll up to the base to collect my mission complete, and nothing happens. I realized basically instantly what the problem was, luckily enough. Maybe I suspected it all along. Now I have to wait for a second run back to complete, eating into my precious time bonus, and have to fight the random stuff all over the map during this time, potentially affecting my combat bonus. I was mad at myself because the mission went essentially perfectly up until the very end there. However, we still get the gold by a decent margin with max combat bonus, an okay-ish time bonus, and my life is complete. Mission 10 is behind us at last. And with that, we're finally back into the flow of the plot, as the Spirit of Fire now heads down into the secret Forerunner base that the Covenant are hiding in with Anders. The problem is, we get checked at the gate because we somehow managed to get the upper decks of the ship absolutely covered in flood. Maybe it can spread through the air or something. This stuff gets everywhere. So now, there are 2 missions actually of glorified airport security, where the base won't let us in until we're all cleansed of enemies. Handily, they will provide some robotic sentinels, these flying laser guns essentially, that will help you get things all ship-shape for your visit to this secret base, although they're also hostile to you as well, handily and perhaps confusingly. I don't know if the Forerunners don't like us or not. It kind of seems like they're not only inviting us into their base, they're kind of forcing us to go into their base, so it kind of seems like they want us in here, but also they're coming to kill us because we're like a hostile life form. I'm not quite sure, maybe it's all malfunctioning. I remember like the Forerunners are also sometimes hostile to you in the original Halo as well, and I can't quite remember why it is they become hostile to you. They might associate humans with spreading the flood and therefore want to kill the humans. It's something like that. And indeed, we are spreading the flood, to be fair. In fact, we're trying to spread it into the Forerunner base. So maybe it's all fair they're trying to kill us. They probably just shouldn't bring us into the base. Like, it was their idea for us to come in here. So they let the Covenant in, they might let us in if we can clear the decks enough. Basically, you have to defend the top of the ship like it's a big base with loads of turrets everywhere and unit production buildings. And the goal is just kill absolutely everything, including the Forerunner units that come to fight the Flood for you. So just go wild, basically. Now, I know what you're all thinking. Can you Hornet Rush on this mission? Well, yes. Is it a good idea? Well, maybe it actually is, because of 2 key reasons. One, the flood buildings all over the ship spawn things constantly, so new attacks will be coming in from all sorts of directions all the time, and therefore having a pathfinding free mobile force which is immune to a lot of flood units too sounds pretty good. And reason number 2 is that you can't make Scorpions, so an actually good option isn't available. The general plan is to have the Spartans and Forge pressing into the concentrations of flood buildings to kill them off and slow the spawning rate, while a mix of Hornets and an increasing number of turrets all over the place keeps things generally stable in the meantime. But the Forerunners do have another trick, the Ring of Pain, a big field of death will pass over the ship on a timer, which damages everything it touches. So this will eventually kill off all the flood buildings for you, if you like, and stop them regenerating too, which is more important. Very nice, but it also kills you. Less nice. You can avoid some of the damage though by giving a move order to run through the ring, and hence spend less time in the death field. It also kept saying something about putting units inside airlocks to stop this thing from killing you. I never worked out what it was talking about or what an airlock was. Some of the buildings here can be garrisoned, and even though I think I tried to do it, I couldn't work out how, so I don't know. Either I was looking at the wrong thing, or I was just too stupid to work it out. We'll just take the damage, I guess. Also worth noting for this mission is that the advantage of modding the camera is very palpable. Being able to see more of the ship at once makes managing your firefighting strategy much easier. It's kind of janky, and I'd love to see views like this officially supported, basically, as an option in all games such as this. But we are on the secret easy mode, that's what I'm trying to say, because being able to deftly give out orders or move long distances or select loads of units in different places without having to pan the camera a load and remember where stuff is, as was intended, it's just easier, it's nicer. Another victory for the camera freedom movement and another victory for cheating. The only other thing to say about this mission is that it's another one with a slow and dissonant ending. I had to not kill off a bunch of the flood buildings because I needed to keep the mission going, so I could kill more of these sentinels that were gradually being fed in by the forerunners. So we have a very calm ending where not much is happening, and I ground myself up to the right number, and then I could kill off the last couple of buildings for the win. I did get a gold in the end, but only just, as my combat bonus wasn't very good at all. I kept losing all the bits and pieces of the ship, like the airlocks and turrets and things, and those probably count towards your casualty count. And many of the turrets, I seem to recall, were killed and rebuilt over and over again because of just stubbornly putting them back every time they died. That probably didn't look good. We're now out on the other side of this security zone, and we emerge into a brightly lit Earth-like environment for some reason. These forerunners have managed to get another planet going on the inside of that desert planet from before. Very nice. As usual, our characters don't care about this, which is why it feels like it just sort of shoots past as a little side note, oh, there's another planet inside this planet. Oh well, on to the next mission. Nobody mentioned that. Don't even look at it. Don't look up, guys. There's nothing going on here. Well, they are distracted, to be fair, by the fact that we trade paint big time with a Covenant ship that was parked right by the exit to that airport security terminal. And then a battle breaks out, giving us another mission up on the roof. Actually, Serena, the sassy AI girlfriend that Halo always tends to give you, does mention that it's a bit weird that there seems to be another planet inside the planet, but yes, none of the other characters say anything about it. So somebody mentioned it, somebody noticed. I do remember being confused actually by the setting, because I thought we'd teleported somewhere else at some point. It was only right at the end. I was like, oh, all of the stuff at this late stage of the game happens inside the planet, where the flood missions happened. And you might be asking, why is it really brightly lit inside the planet? And maybe we'll find that out later too. Just don't look up, alright? For now, let's look at the mission. What you have to do is repair a power core on the edge of the ship, and interestingly, that's all you need to do. And that means it's a different kind of mission, in that the more resources you put into these Cyclopses, these repair robots basically, the faster you'll complete the mission. You don't have to kill anything in particular, you just have to get this thing back to full health. The only question will be, can you protect the Cyclopses? So you have to spend a certain amount of resources on units to keep everything alive while you do this objective, and you just have to find the right balance. Now, the opposition against this is the Covenant, of course, who make millions of landings all over the deck of the ship. To defend against this, you can not only make Wolverines, but you can also make a new unit, the Hawk. The game almost never lets you make them. It's like an anti-air air unit, essentially. But now it's time for Hornet Rush 2.0 Hawk Rush, as these things can fly way off the map and target enemy transports well before they're in range of the ship, allowing me to at least attempt the strategy I wish I had back in Mission 6 when I was complaining about something similar. It doesn't work all that well, to be fair, but it's fun to be able to try it at the very least. One thing I'm not sure about, but kept trying as well, is whether the healing AoE ability can also heal the power core for the objective. It's hard to say because the health bar barely moves because it has so much health, but it might be doing something. but you probably wouldn't notice because it's also being repaired by the Cyclopses at the same time. Something, something, something. I might have been spending resources to make things go a bit faster. It's probably better to spend the resources on buying more Cyclopses rather than healing the core with your special ability. I expect, but I was trying it anyway because I probably thought I was being clever. By the way, what is a healing field? The sort of weird thing you have available to you. Haven't mentioned it so far, but you can heal your units whenever you want, as you've probably noticed throughout this campaign. I don't really know why. Well, we have to not ask questions like that, because that leads to questions like, well, what is health anyway? Why can I get shot 9 times with a plasma rifle and be fine, but getting shot 10 times always kills me? Questions like that need to be asked. Well, a brutally realistic Steel Division X Halo Wars game coming soon in the growing library of Offie Imagination games. As you might have seen there, we repaired the thing and the mission comes to a swift end. We smashed the gold target easy peasy, and Hawks is probably the reason for that. Probably an obvious strategy to go for since it lets you make them all of a sudden. On with the plot. How are we going to rescue Anders from this Forerunner shipyard? And where even is this shipyard? I remember not being sure while playing, but looking at the footage, I think it's implied to be in the sky of the inverted planets, like in amongst the clouds. And then somewhere towards the core, like deeper, is the quote-unquote sun that makes this whole planet inside a planet thing work and be illuminated. I don't think it really shows you what's going on, but we'll keep an eye out to try and work that out as well. I want to know. Oh, but one thing I think we should all notice, so that we can never unnotice it, is that the Covenant soldiers in these scenes are relatively naked on their lower halves, and you get full ass shots quite often, so look out for those. Don't turn to look at the thing, Covenant guards. Okay, we got away from that. It's nice that the Covenant have all this space technology, but they haven't yet invented trousers. Especially relevant actually, because if this place is among the clouds, as it appears to be, then for clouds to form, it must be very cold in this layer of the inward atmosphere thing, despite being closer to the heat source, presumably. Uh-oh, the dire physics and even direr trousers situation in Halo Wars has been, shall we say, laid bare. As for what happens, it turns out the ancient shipyard is one button operated, so getting Anders to poke the keyboard instantly does exactly what the Covenant wanted. Well, that's good UX right there. I don't remember why Anders has the magic power to activate these devices, or if it's even mentioned at all in the plot. Well, it comes in useful again because she notices a voice-activated teleporter feature that allows her to instantly escape on her own. How about that? And then, thanks to the will of the Force, she randomly teleported to be standing next to Forge, somewhere on the planet, right in time to be rescued from the flood. Forge has a smooth line, but Anders, she doesn't even say thanks because there's no time or something she says here. That's just what it's like being a Sundara. We now have to escape the area before the flood or Covenant cause us too many issues. After a minute or so, a pelican appears to pick us up, although unfortunately not literally once again. It only picks up Anders, and then she orders us to stay behind and secure the area. Why? Well, we might as well, I guess. The plot part of the mission is now over. We did the thing, but since we're here, let's just conquer some random square kilometer of this planet to make a point. The mission then actually turns out to be conquer 4 Covenant bases. You get given 3 Spartans to help out, and can quickly proceed to a nearby base to take it and get your own base started. I noticed I was actually trying in this fight for the base, in that I was like microing the infantry to keep them alive and using the Spartans more tankishly. I might have actually learned how to play the game by now, which is nice. Well, eventually I do take the base, and I began implementing a certain build, while finding that defending this base against the Covenant attacks that start spawning was pretty easy. They would make various air attacks that the turrets were enough to stop on their own, and their ground attacks all had to cross a bridge down the road to get to us. So I put the 3 Spartans on that bridge, and as we've probably all learned by now, they can deal with pretty much everything, even when not garrisoned into something. If there was a building here, or like we'd invented shovels or something to make a hole, we'd be invincible. Soon, I have a whole load of Hornets at my disposal, so it's time to dispose of them by pushing over the bridge. It turns out the next enemy base is right there in front of us where I was standing, guarded by a load of units. I also brought an elephant for some reason. I might have been thinking of using it as a tank, because going full Hornets means you can't make a vehicle depot. But you can alternatively make use of the fact the central base building can make warthogs, elephants, and sometimes Gremlins, if only it was literally once again. Maybe the plan was to have the elephant get shot instead of the hornets. I don't know if they're actually good for that though. Well, amidst the chaos that ensues, things seem to go okay, and we gradually work our way through this base with a few losses here and there. Taking the third base proves pretty easy, as not much was there. I had a load of hornets there, and we secure it without issue. Then, not falling for the game's tricks, I didn't go for the fourth base, which I had seen was in the top left. Instead, we'll check out the bottom right in search of more side objective stuff. And you do indeed get one. Just near the third base, there is an abandoned scarab which you can take with the Spartan, and that becomes a side objective. Took me a while to work out how to do it. For whatever reason, my Spartan kept shooting at the thing rather than getting into it. But we're going to get this thing. It's the same thing we fought with all those warthogs a while back, but it's not as good as that giant laser machine. This time, it's just a good tank, I think, anyway. The corner here also had some stuff spamming some flood units, and I foolishly killed them off. Again, my determination to do quote-unquote good things has caused me a problem, because as I killed off all the flood spawning things around the map, it stopped me doing one of the side goals, which was to kill 10 flood units of a certain kind. And I don't even remember noticing that that was an objective. I think I just realized I hadn't done it after the mission ended. Therefore, it's very unlikely I was paying attention to anything I'm saying here when I was playing. Head was empty, hornets were rushed, and here we go for the fourth base. Having loads of air units here comes in extra useful because you can attack the fourth base easily by flying up this cliff on the left-hand side of the map. It's actually even better than I thought it was, and a lack of stage knowledge made this attack worse, as we'll see in a second. My current problem is that I decided to attack also via the overland route, which you access using a teleporter to go up the cliffs. Theoretically, that's a good idea, to attack the enemy base from two sides, right? Well, the Covenant have this big army that's sitting on the land route, and it only aggroes once you attack there. So while I did kill their base, I lost all of my land attack, and the stuff that was there was aggroed over to the base and started fighting the hornets as well, which caused me to run away. Anyway, we do win that horrible fight in the end. And I discovered two secrets. One is that the enemy's air attacks are coming from this base right on the edge of the map, which I could have flown over and killed ages ago to stop them from attacking me. And two, you don't actually have to make the final base to complete the mission, you just have to start making it, you have to pay for it essentially. That means I really could have skipped that big and lossy final fight by just taking out the base from the air, cheekily putting one down before everything aggroed onto me, and that would end the mission without fighting everything, I think anyway. Well, that was an idea to try, but we didn't need it as it turns out, because we just about got the gold by the narrowest of margins. Normally you have to get all of the side objectives to realistically get a gold. Here we didn't, but we just about get it because we still got a maximum combat bonus despite me losing like half my army there at the end. I think it's because I had killed so many air units off camera just passively with my main base, because they kept attacking it while I wasn't looking at it, that I was probably grinding out a really high score without even realizing it. It could just tell you your current score all the time, because, well, that would be fun, wouldn't it? Because if you do a good thing and then the game also says you did a good thing, that's a bit better than doing a good thing and never realizing you've done a good thing, to put it in the most abstract way. There should be some feedback on how you're doing during the mission, not only to make it more fun, so you feel like, yes, I'm doing the right thing and get some sort of feedback reward from that, but also, perhaps more importantly, to save time, because like if you're failing, I don't want to just keep playing the mission, I'd rather just start again and like do something different from the beginning, as you saw me doing a few times in this campaign when I noticed it was going badly. There are some elements where you might not notice things are going badly. Tell me that I suck, game. I'm asking for two things here, aren't I? I wanted to praise me more for doing well, and I wanted to criticize me more for doing badly. Just tell me how you feel, Halo Wars. Halo Wars is the real Sundara here. We better move on then. While I was ranting, our crew have come up with a plan. We're going to throw a nuclear reactor into the sun because Anders claims it will cause a supernova that will destroy the Forerunner shipyard. Thus, we are forced to confront the idea that there is a sun inside this planet, but somehow the plot is still skirting past this, never showing an image of it. And, well, I don't know, it just seems like this Forerunner facility is extremely interesting and of extreme military significance to the humans. One could say that contacting the rest of humanity to come and use it would be good, as there's only one ship's worth of Covenant here, and 3 Spartans is enough to deal with that. What happens to that transport with like 8 Spartans we had back in Arcadia? I think we could capture this place, and given that Anders is the chosen one, we can even control it, unlike the Covenant. But nay, we're going to blow up the sun, which must be very small, I was going to say, to fit inside this hollow planet, especially as, from the curvature of the planet like in earlier cutscenes, you can tell it's very small. It has a much stronger curvature than Earth, basically. So this sun must be like a white dwarf or something, and I feel we could go very far down this rabbit hole because I did a course in something called like stellar evolution in university. I could probably like find some mathematical complaints to prove that Halo isn't real. But what I really want is for the characters on the screen, or the presentation of the game in general, to acknowledge and use all the sci-fi stuff it's referring to. At least let us look at this shipyard and the planet interior and maybe get some info about what the rest of the planet's getting up to. I don't like how irrelevant all the cool stuff is to the game as a whole, that's what I am saying. And some more plot would help introduce the actual mission, because as you might have seen, our plan to throw a reactor into the sun somehow begins with us flying it around the surface, then crash landing, and deciding to use an elephant to tow the reactor to an unspecified location. So I don't know, is the sun physically connected to the surface of the planet? Plausible? Well, we'll see what actually happens eventually. But I think the sci-fi sounding plot of throwing a bomb into the sun is being undermined by the following half an hour of dragging the bomb around a field with a tractor. What are we actually doing? Haven't we gone in the wrong direction? Isn't the sun up? And don't we have a wide variety of flying machines, including a gigantic space cruiser that can go anywhere and shoot things anywhere? I don't know. The gods have ordained that we must solve this problem using a Hornet Rush, and for that we have to go down to the ground first, so we'll just sort of drive around down here and then come up with some more ideas later. So yes, we start the Hornet Rush. The gimmick at the start is you have to pull the reactor up a hill, and it was saying if the elephant pulling it dies, it will roll back down the hill, and you'll have to do it again. Well, you can just not lead the charge with the reactor itself, and that won't happen. So, I don't know, it feels like they made a big deal out of nothing there. There is an enemy base at the top of the hill, and I started attacking it even before the Hornet Rush was ready, just harassing them really. And this is a good idea because the enemy do build up their base and improve it and spam units if you just leave them alone. So putting pressure on right away is helpful. Soon, I also had a load of Hornets and we started taking out that second base easily enough. Before the towing could continue though, I then stopped and wanted to finish my build-up. Along the way I was being attacked by vampires. Insert my not literally comment here once again. And I was using the Spartans to fend them off. I hid the Hornets in a corner so they wouldn't die. But what I didn't notice, already put together, was that the enemy was almost exclusively sending vampires to attack us. They're basically composing their army with the direct counter to what I'm trying to basically compose my army of. So, will the sheer power of belief be enough to overcome the unfavourable matchup this time? Well, maybe for a while I found myself less using the Hornets to attack and was more just dodging around, trying to avoid damage the whole time and avoid the different directions the vampires were coming from. This still works out because there just aren't many enemies on the map, and the Covenant didn't really build anything from their bases, like despite my earlier claim, so I tended to arrive to find just turrets had been built up, and there were barely any units. So we secured a third base okay, and all of the lost Hornets were just being rebuilt and sent to a rally point at the front line, which is another advantage to Hornets, by the way. They get straight back into the action when they're being replaced, but them being replaced is also the downside to Hornets. Well anyway, this path leads us to a fourth base, and here things got really bogged down. The enemy had finally built something, a scarab as it turns out, which spawns amongst my attacking force because I was standing on the thing the enemies come out of. Luckily, I had the reactor parked in such an odd location that it doesn't get any aggro. However, that doesn't help the Hornets and the Vulture, now stuck fighting not only the Scarab, but continuing streams of Vultures, now attacking from behind. And we lose pretty much everything, although we do scrape a win and conquer the fourth base. However, I soon also learned that I was wasting my time here, always nice to learn, because while I waited around to build up this fourth base, ready to face like whatever would happen when the reactor made it to the destination, you can imagine like a hold for 5 minutes wave thing happening. It turns out nothing happens. The mission ends if you get to the destination, which is a teleporter machine of some kind, maybe a teleporter to the sun? That might be useful, add that to your shipyard. It's not actually that. In fact, I can't remember what it is. We'll have to both see what it is in a minute. Well, anyway, the whole point was I was wasting a whole bunch of time. You can just drive here and end the mission. You don't have to kill everything. And nothing bad happens at the end, so there's no point setting up defenses. And it's another one of those mechanics where it's just like, oh, now you know. So it's nice to learn, I guess, and have an idea for next time. But I'm also like, well, I was wasting my time the first time then. Like, can't it have just told me the challenge up front, and I would have done it just fine? Well, the ultimate ending is I barely got a silver, with a sloppy and slow performance there, but we do have clear ideas about how to improve it. So I quickly did the mission again, with a few changes. I simply spammed scorpions. Yes, denigrate me all you want. I am scum, barbarian, a common prole, impure, stooping once again to using a good unit. It totally works, and we blasted through the mission in like half the time with far fewer casualties, so there you go. But then comes my big time save at the end as well. Once we reach the 4th base, I make an attack as a distraction essentially, but I don't think I even needed to do this. There is enough space to safely skirt around the whole area and drive right to the objective, which is unguarded. Soon we're there, the mission ends just fine, and this time we do take home the gold. Not a very chunky gold, because we didn't get the kill 20 vampires side goal. Since they attacked in pairs over time in a very scripted seeming way, they're probably spawning from a building in the corner again or something like that. So it would have been better to play slower, because I wouldn't really have lost any time bonus, but I would have got a lot more points from doing the side objective. That classic Halo Wars thing. It doesn't matter though, as long as we have the gold, I've got what I need, I can stop complaining about it. We can move on and see where this blow up the sun plotline is actually going. First, I will complain that Forge here says we're burning sunshine, and I must remind everyone that if the sun is inside the planet, then it's never night time, so that phrase referring to it being almost dusk doesn't count, guys. I found more evidence that Halo Wars isn't real. Well, whatever. While we're doing whatever we were doing just here, the Covenant show up. So it's time for an epic showdown, in which the cutscene demonstrates the sheer killability of the Covenant, perhaps backing up my claims in the first part of this video about how they kind of suck. We see the Spartans mow down waves of the so-called elites. Yes, these are the good Covenant soldiers, and they unfortunately only brought spears. And as we discussed before, they did not bring trousers. The Spartans simply parry the spears with their bare hands and otherwise hip-fire a bunch of weapons and win easily. And it's not like only Spartan super soldiers could do this. The regular guys in the human military have the exact same weapons, they just don't have deflector shields. Well anyway, Forge is having trouble fighting his opponent. That assault rifle didn't do anything, didn't even appear to be ricocheting off the thing's armor. Just very inaccurate, I suppose. This Covenant is the Arbiter, the villain of the story if you like, although he's never framed as such. He's the only named character you fight, but he's only named in the subtitle, so he's just another random soldier if you have the subtitles turned off. And unfortunately, he fights with a sword, which proves to be his downfall, because to kill Forge, he has to bring him in very close, at which point Forge just stabs him. Plus, he was doing a villain monologue and stuff. You know the drill with this sort of thing. And that's a victory by the looks of things. The fact that some actual Spartans could have won this fight perhaps demonstrates the various military weaknesses of this somehow spacefaring Covenant civilization. Well, Forge gets into some kind of elevator-like thing with the reactor or bomb. The camera kind of implies there that we were opening the roof up to shoot us into the sun, something like that. Not quite sure. And obviously nothing was mentioned about what was going on there. You might be wondering, why does Forge have to go with the bomb/nuclear reactor? Well, no reason is given in the game, but I suppose it was decided that someone had to pull the manual override or whatever, and Forge is the one to do it. It feels like somebody should have said something about that or something, writing and stuff. Well, while Forge was doing that, the rest of the crew is back on the surface with their own problems, because the door to exit the planet, that thing we flew through in the earlier missions, is closed. It can be opened, but only by working this giant door control thing, which is also a bit like a puzzle, hence the final mission is here. it's time to let loose because there are enemies all over the map and you basically have to capture all of it, so just kill everything and then there'll be some kind of door puzzle, so we'll get to that. There is a second base position that's unoccupied right next to the first base position, so you get a really quick start with a 2-base rush, and we'll use this to whip out the old unreliable Hornet rush, although this time this strategy will finally shine big time, because firstly you have a higher pop cap in this mission, so it allows you to mass more DPS and hence take less damage in fights, allowing us to easily take out the nearby Covenant base near our second base with help from the Spartans as well, but more importantly, you can upgrade the Hornets into the Hawk super unit as the game puts it. That's the thing we saw very briefly earlier in the game when it lets you use them to fight off enemy air attacks. Well, they're just as good against ground units and probably better than the Hornets against ground units as well. So, with a cloud of like 20 of these things, we start just flattening the entire mission essentially. It turns out that if you kill that Covenant base fast enough, I guess they don't expand. There are 2 more base sites like on the Covenant side of the map, which were empty when I got to them, so I could just slap down extra bases should I wish, although there's not much point at this stage. So yes, I'm pretty sure we rushed quickly enough to stop anything from actually happening in this stage. Therefore, all I really do for the entire mission is like spend 10 minutes making these units, then spend another 10 minutes just going around the map killing everything with barely any pushback. So that's the end of that. There was a brief message you might have seen from Forge there, saying he's at the access point to the sun and needs to break through. I don't know, there's a locked door up there or something. I don't know what he's talking about. Nobody replies to him, or cares, I guess. Not even to copy that. If you're going to start like writing dialogue into the game, you might as well write enough for it to be worth doing in the first place. Well, yes, we cleared the map out really easily. In fact, I would say this is the easiest mission in the game. It's easier than the first mission, like you actually take losses in the first mission. I don't know why this mission is so just mercilessly easy all of a sudden. It really gives you a break right at the end. You'd expect some sort of massive thing to happen, and maybe a massive thing is supposed to happen, but if you kill the enemy right away, it just doesn't. We get into the door puzzle where you have to unlock pairs of these locking towers in a certain order. There were like symbols on the force field and they represent a clock face or something, and you do it in clockwise order. It's something like that. Since there were no enemies, I had plenty of time to waste like clicking on everything. I could just do it by trial and error, I expect, at that stage. We just barely get a gold here because I totally didn't do the massively high scoring side goal of killing 3 scarabs, because while there was one on the map in the beginning that actually fell through the portal when I opened it, I think, so I didn't even kill it with units, we didn't give the enemy a chance to build like anything, let alone a scarab. So there were no more to kill and we couldn't get that objective, but with a basically perfect combat and time bonus performance, we still just about get away with it and we don't have to do that again, which is all very nice. We're out of here. Or are we? Both in plot and in my gameplay quest terms, there is more to do. First, our ship hasn't left, because it turns out that whatever Forge did increased the sun's gravity to the point when we can't fly away from it, so whoops. Probably worth noting the physics isn't going to be right here, like adding the mass of a guy in a box won't really affect the gravitational field of the sun. It's probably going to make it a lot hotter, but if you're making it go supernova or whatever it said they were doing to it, it doesn't look like it's going supernova. Well, something's gone wrong. However, our snarky AI confirms we can just use this technique to escape here. We can slingshot through the sun. I guess we have deflector shields or something, so that's all fine. And use its gravitational pull to fire us out the other side of the planet, right through that hole we opened up earlier. With that, we're free of the planet as it collapses, and I guess we're left to wonder what exactly we just sacrificed there, perhaps dooming humanity to many decades of war with the Covenant, because we didn't take the fleet for ourselves. It did actually say in the dialogue during that previous mission that the Covenant don't have any way to open the gate. Only humans can open and close the gate into this planet for whatever reason. I think it's because of that retcon I might have mentioned ages ago where like the Forerunners are humans or something, I don't remember. Well, the point is, we were in a great position to take that resource, but we were so determined to not let the Covenant have it, even though they couldn't take it, that we destroyed it. So we might have actually ruined everything here. I'm not going to say this is a happy ending. Also, because we blew up our reactor core, we can't use our warp drive or whatever it is in this universe. So to escape the area, we have to just like fly off for 1,000 years into the void. So everyone goes into cryogenic sleep and they'll probably come back later. I think like there is a Halo Wars 2, which is a direct sequel to this game. So they don't actually fly off for 1,000 years. That would be cool if they came back like way later in the timeline, wouldn't it? However, As Anders was going to sleep, she was noting that not everyone made it out alive, and we see that Sergeant J. Forge, almost certainly John Forge, because we don't deserve nice things, unfortunately died. Nobody knows why he died. Even the officers who presumably ordered him to kill himself to manually override the sun. There's probably a button in the sun that somebody had to press or something like that. They just forgot to mention it or put it in the plot or whatever. I guess that's the end of that. Okay, I just looked at the Halo Wars wiki. His name is John Forge. It is actually John Forge. It also said his knife is called Lucy. Don't know if that was mentioned in the game, but somebody's decided that on the wiki. And his daughter appears in some of the Halo books as well, so there's a whole Forge thing in the Halo world. It also said that yes, the next game is in fact a direct sequel to this one, and Anders is in that one as well. So the plot carries on from here. There's more stuff. If you want to see that stuff, I'll probably play it at some point, I expect. I also saw that Anders' first name is Ellen, which means something like light in ancient Greek from like Hellenes. So one was called Forge, the other one was called Light. She lit his forge. I think there's a very deep and personal connection between these two characters who shared at least 3 glances and 2 lines of dialogue throughout the game. I've got 2 more missions to clean up. First, Mission 2, in which I only got a bronze, primarily because I didn't do all the side goals, this being from before I cared about the score probably. Those goals are easy enough. They essentially involve clearing the pockets on the edges of the map before you attack the main base. I was rushing pretty hard and seemed to be doing them all at once, incurring a load of losses by using Marines for some of it too, but I think you have to, as vehicles can't pass through these shield walls you sometimes see, a mechanic that never comes up again in the entire game as it happens. Another thing that never comes up again is having to manually target these unaggroable Covenant buildings. There's this base that's unlike any other base you see in the game, which is supposedly producing air units according to the in-game dialogue, but it's more like props or scenery or something. So it's sort of hard to destroy in that you might not notice you have to click on everything. I guess it's a bit like the time you did have to manually kill every flood building on that one mission or something. Well, that was that. I spammed a load of scorpions into the enemy base at the end. You blow up a thing and that's the mission. It didn't go that well overall, with decent losses likely occurred among the Marines. But we do get a gold thanks to the massive objective score you get from doing the many side objectives, so that'll do for now. The real meat was always going to be, though, this post-game challenge, going back to the dreaded Mission 4, my old stomping grounds. For this new attempt, I was going to have the advantage of knowing about the series building paradigm I was ranting about in the first part, which I only learned in the mission after this, so that will let me do faster builds and generally be more effective. But more useful than that, I think, was to implement a lesson from the mission after this, Mission 6, which is the power of garrisoned infantry, with the regenerating health upgrade in particular, which luckily you are allowed to buy on this mission. I talked in my previous commentary on this mission about how there are these garrisonable platforms all over the place, and usually I didn't garrison most of them, but this time my approach was to garrison all of them, even the ones I didn't think were going to be very useful, because just having really strong Marine units ensconced around the place turns out to be a really great distraction. It also tends to draw aggro from the civilian evacuation routes, and this just generally works better than expected. The real advantage I was able to glean, though, is perhaps something that happened completely randomly. The biggest difference between this attempt and my others is where the enemy dropships were coming in. In particular, I noticed they tended to be dropping troops where the civilians spawn more than usual, which is okay because there are 2 Marine towers guarding it and they tend to kill everything pretty fast, but more importantly, they weren't making attacks on my second base. I mentioned in the first part how I suspected there was a random element to where the enemy attack you on this mission. Perhaps it's actually a reaction to where your units are, so having Marines spread out across the whole map, as I do in this example, was leading to a more favourable behaviour pattern. Essentially, the long and protracted battles I expected over the second base and experienced in my previous attempts, both to its northeast against the main enemy base and to the southeast where usually loads of dropships would come in and attack you with units, it just never happened. I still invested in all of the defences anyway, so I wasn't getting that much economic advantage from not having to fight, but still, The reduced pressure and resulting unit losses means that Cargo 2 was extremely heavily guarded relatively early on. I ended up with something like 10 Marine squads on the air attack route, and the actually useful tower platforms garrisoned nearby. One thing to note that I might have touched on already is that this map has various buildings that look like they can be garrisoned because they look very similar to the towers I thought you couldn't garrison in Mission 6, probably because of the experience from this mission, well maybe anyway. Basically there's a bit of annoying game design continuity error going on, and I'm trying to blame this for my many woes, but I don't actually remember if it was the cause. Let's just claim that it was. Probably the most important, single thing to do is garrison the tower that's near Cargo 1's old position, as I noticed this tended to make the enemy continue attacking the Cargo 1 site long after it was dead. Many waves would go and stop at the Cargo 1 site to fight your tower and lose because of my aforementioned ranting about how Marines in towers are basically invincible. So that, combined with the lack of second base attacks, that is until the last minute when they went really wild and started attacking it, but it's too late by then anyway, it meant that this attempt was really chill, and dare I say it, straight up easy. Cargo 2 just wasn't attacked, most of the map was calm, and things just kind of went fine. One other factor helping out was that the mission lets you upgrade your Marines into ODSTs. One of those rare super unit upgrades, which probably means, because you're allowed to do this, that spamming Marines was the developer intended way to do this mission. That's sort of meta clue you can pick up along the way with this game. What it actually does, well, the game doesn't tell you. I remember it's very expensive, and in the past I was I'm not buying that because it costs as much as 20 units of Marines, and I just thought I'd rather have 20 units of Marines than whatever Marine contingent I have right now be better by an unknown amount. I think I actually do know what it does now, because in my previous part I was ranting about unit veterancy, and the same developer insider info that was talking about how that worked also mentioned what the ODST upgrade does. It's something like you get 25% extra attack and defense, something like that. But perhaps more strikingly, it doubles either the damage or fire rate, or maybe even both, of a Marine unit's rocket launcher attack, and when they're garrisoned in a tower they will automatically fire a rocket at passing vehicles. Outside of a tower you have to manually trigger this. So this makes the ODSTs really good as garrison units to fight air units, exactly what we were doing in this mission. And I'm pretty sure I did see some aerial transports going down after being hit by Marine rockets as well. So whatever I was trying before, spamming Wolverines, which is a harder and more expensive thing to spam, probably wasn't the answer. Just getting ODSTs, who are surprisingly good against air units, was the answer. And I think the endgame dialogue somewhere does talk about garrisoning the platforms as well, as another potential hint. Well, it took me a while to pick up on it, but this ended up being a relatively easy goal. We actually almost got the side objective for 1,000 civilians saved. If we'd got that, this would have been a triumphing goal with a massive margin. Instead, just having a good enough combat bonus from the easier and calmer playthrough of the mission meant we got the gold without the side goal. I had something like 980 civilians saved, and you needed 1,000. And I do remember seeing civilians dying and just not helping them because I wasn't planning on going for the civilian saved goal. I'm sure that this approach, and having similar luck perhaps, would allow you to finally truly triumph over that mission, but I'm not quite crazy enough to go that far it seems. We're just going to walk away with the gold and call it a day at that, which is probably the right call. And with that, your boy Offie D now has all the gold medals in Halo Wars Definitive Edition on heroic difficulty, which gives you a specific achievement. It's actually more common than another achievement I was able to get, which is completing heroic difficulty with all times under par, indicating that it probably is easier to get golds if you take your time more, something I kept suspecting as we went along. Well, with all that, my Halo Wars adventure is over, so let's sum up with a few final thoughts. I mostly spewed my thoughts on the game in general, at the start of the first part, but the short version is that I expected this game to be bad, mostly because of PC Master Race prejudice, and then I was delighted to find that it was not only good, but some of the specific things I thought would be bad about it because of their console peasant stench actually made this game better than the usual PC Master Race strategy game experience, I thought. The simplifications don't make the game feel more simple. they make it more involved and makes more of every input you give, like everything's more impactful. It makes you feel more in control. Refer to my previous rants for whatever I'm actually talking about here, but yes, overall, a great RTS experience. It's both beginner friendly, but also has plenty to do for people like me who are quite experienced, but don't really like the idea of the extreme APM games such as Age of Empires or StarCraft, where you're supposed to be doing something like a couple of times per second. You're never not inputting things. Here, you don't have to input so much, but you get more stuff happening per input. Like, your inputs are more powerful, that's the way I was trying to put it. So it still feels like there's a lot of micro going on, a lot of micro to be done. It's just easier to do. And it's starting to lean towards my heavy suspicion that high APM strategy games kind of indicate a design flaw in the game itself, because while it does give a really high skill ceiling, I guess I don't really like that idea. For me, it's too daunting. Like, when you play Age of Empires, or you see people playing Age of Empires at the top level, the difference between what they want to do and how many inputs they have to give to make it happen is too large. That's what I'm claiming. And Halo Wars, with its slight simplification on the RTS genre, slightly solves that in some way. Like, when you want to do something, usually it's been made so like 1 or 2 clicks is enough and stuff will just sort of automatically happen, because you're not supposed to have very much control. You're supposed to be allowed to play this with only a controller, so like your control of the camera is going to be a little bit limited. It's going to be hard to click on specific things because you can't use the edges of the screen. I think in controller mode you can only select things in the middle of the screen, for example. Well, it's got all these limitations in mind, and while you don't have to play with those limitations, it works really well around them and inspires, to some extent, ideas for how these shortcuts that the game has taken on the player's behalf to make the player experience good in a limited setting would also work quite well in an unlimited setting. That is to say, normal PC Master Race RTS games might benefit from being like, you know what, every order is attack move, and not having it be a separate thing, and just other such simplifications where the game guesses what you want in context. I'm lazy, I like Halo Wars. Those are the 2 points that are clashing here and moulding together quite well, it seems. Well, we'll leave that at that, whatever I'm talking about there. I had another sum-up point I wanted to make, which is about the plot. I liked many of the ideas of the plot, but as I think I also said at the start of the first part, I think they generally blew it in the plot department, despite having tons of great potential. I strongly suspect a more interesting story was intended, but it wasn't really told or didn't make the cut or something like that. There's plenty of room to, well, not necessarily add anything new, but just use what you've added already more, like have the characters react to all the cool stuff and just talk about what the plot is a bit more. Like, they're silent for most of the game. Like, you can have a voice come up and just talk about whatever in the background if you want, or just have some boring cutscenes where they discuss what's going on. I don't know. More stuff in that regard would be good, I think, and probably just adding some cheap dialogue would be the answer here. Also, you do need to add a lot more of Anders, like, pouting and John Forge's boyish charm, which would probably make the Halo Wars experience that much better, with that much in that sentence probably referring to an imperceivably small quantity, yet complain I must. It's the will of the Force, thanks to Halo Wars, for giving me a good enough time that I wanted to go further than I usually do with the game, and got more enjoyment than I expected. I might as well check out Halo Wars 2 sometime, shouldn't I? Well, the next thing I'm going to be commentating on was an extremely stupid challenge run in the original Rome Total War that I spent an outrageous amount of time experimenting with and preparing for, all to bring you a campaign playthrough that will combine being challenging and impressive with being extremely, extremely boring. So that's coming soon, along with countless other playthroughs on my PC gaming adventures, so look forward to all that. Thanks for watching, and a round of applause, if you will, for the surprisingly fun, if occasionally scrappy and frustrating, Halo Wars Definitive Edition.